Tonight's lecture is about Israel, as it's called, Israel and the Arab states, the good years, obviously 49 to 52. But I have the good years with a question mark. And you'll see why as tonight unfolds. And so let me begin. Israel, when it became a state in 48-49, has two fundamental problems vis-a-vis the Arabs. But interestingly, it's not what you think. It wasn't that they were afraid the Arabs were going to attack them. They weren't afraid of a second round, as it was called. That's not one of the problems in 1948 to 52. The Arabs spoke like that, and the term second round was constantly in Israeli parlance and newspapers and so forth. But it wasn't true. And one of the main reasons is because the Arab countries, if you know what's going on in the Middle East, I know you'll be shocked to hear about instability in the Arab countries, but they were going through a particularly violent series of convulsions and assassinations in the years 48 to 52. Okay? Can we move to the next one? Okay, then that's fine. Then I'll tell it to you out loud, and eventually the picture will catch up. All the Arab heads of state were shot in assassinations of various types in 40 to 52. It's amazing. The Prime Minister of Lebanon, of Egypt, of Iraq, the King of Jordan, as I'm sure many of you know. Everybody gets getting bumped off. And who's the one that's doing the shooting? Again, I knew you'd be shocked. Islamic extremists. Gee, can't imagine that. And this is 60 years ago, before the news existed, right? Nothing has changed. And therefore, when you look at the Arab states in the middle, here you go. This guy was the president of Egypt was killed. The prime minister of Lebanon was killed. Nukhrashi Pasha, the prime minister of Egypt, was killed. They're shot in the street, you know. And there are others. And that means that Lebanon's not going to war against Israel. I mean, they have their own problems. They can't get their own government together. The government is highly unstable, with one group suffering a coup from another group, and that sort of thing. Similarly, in Syria, for example, I mean, this guy holds power for a couple months. He got in there by killing the guy before him, and then he gets killed by the guy after him. And so Syria, as you know today, is a fundamentally unstable country. And as a matter of fact, what I'm really speaking about speaks to the fact that only recently has the American media, because they've been forced to hit over the head by a 2x4 of current events, discovered that the Arab states are fakes, that they were put together by the colonial powers after the First World War with no attention really paid to the fundamental multi-ethnic tensions that characterized them, and the borders were drawn in such a way that benefited Britain and France, but they had nothing to do with the realities of those countries. So, for example, we know today, after the American army was in Iraq, they got three parts of Iraq, and they all hate each other and kill each other. Right? You got this we all know because we've learned it. You got the Shiites in the south, you got the Kurds in the north, you got the Sunnis in the middle, and so forth. I mean, Nebuch, the GIs had to pay this price because Bush and these guys didn't figure this out until it was too late. We know at this very moment, if you pay attention to news, and I know everybody here does, otherwise they wouldn't be here. So you know what's really going on in Syria. It's not uprising against Assad. It's the different ethnic groups out to shecht each other. Assad, as you know, is the head of the Alawites. You know this. The Sunnis want to knock out the Alawites and take over and shecht them. The Druze are in the middle, figuring out they don't want to get killed by both sides. There's other groups, actually, some of you never heard about, Ismailis and others that have whole enclaves in different places in Syria. Nobody told me this. I look at the map, I see Syria, it's the color blue or the color green. I thought it's a separate country. And if you listen to their propaganda that they've been putting out ever since 1945 when they became a state, there's a Syrian nationalism. And everybody's loyal to the flag of Syria. It turns out it's all baloney. You see? And how did Assad become powerful? Because his family was going back to the French occupation, and the French didn't like the Sunnis because there were too many of them, and so they favored the Alawites, who were a minority, who therefore looked to the French for patronage, and they gave them all the officer jobs in the army. So when the Syrian army was formed in 1945 after Syria became a state, the Alawites took all the officer jobs, etc., etc., etc. Nobody told me that. You look at Lebanon, and before the Lebanese Civil War, people thought Lebanon is the Switzerland of the Middle East. Some of us are old enough to remember that. Oh, Lebanon is great and all the rest of it. And then one day it blew up because nobody told us that part of it was the Christians, the Maronites, and some of it was the Sunnis in the south facing Israel as the Shiites, and each group has a long history of destroying each other. And even Egypt looks like a monolithic country, and then we find out, oh no, Egypt has what you call 1 million or 10 million Copts who are Christians that don't like the Muslims, and obviously the Muslims don't like them. And you see what I'm saying? You go across the board, and you see one after another that these countries are really fake, and they're held together by terror. By the way, this applies even for the countries that were not created by the British and the French. I'll give you an example. You heard of Saudi Arabia? Yes. The majority of the population, I bet you don't know this, the majority of the population in Saudi Arabia is Shiite. And especially in the East, what they call it. And they've been suppressed and oppressed and repressed by the Saudi regime forever. And every time there are riots and uprisings, they go and shoot them and kill them, and the U.S. is okay with that. Gee, I wonder why. When Bahrain recently, in the Arab Spring, had uprisings from the Shia population, was a decisive majority over there, the Saudis sent in tanks to blow everybody up, which was supplied them by the United States, and I did not see the U.S. government or the press make any big deal about that, because Bahrain has something that we all need. I'm not going to say what that is. Okay? And so the reason I'm trying to tell you that is, on the one hand, you look at the map and you say, is Israel against all these Arabs? But on the other hand, the reality is that the Arabs don't exactly exist as a group. Sometimes they do, and that's bad when it does. But fundamentally, it's different groups that are more interested in the immediate zone of fighting each other to gain power than they were against Israel. So this was the case in 1949, 1952, in the years that I'm covering in this series this year, in the early years of the formation of Israel, and that was a big plus for Israel. That's the plain fact. So even though Ben-Gurion and Moshe Sharett and the others always use in their speeches to figure we have to have security problems, we have to be ready for another round against the Arabs and all the rest of it, it wasn't really true. You understand? Furthermore, I would go on to say that in the military sense, none of the Arab countries at the time I'm speaking about had big armies. They're all very small armies. Again, if you take the trouble to look at the facts, just give you one example. Israel's longest border with Jordan, Transjordan as they call it at that time. The whole Jordanian army, I think I mentioned to you, was 7,000 or 8,000 men. And even when they expanded it under Abdullah after the war, it was like 10,000 or 12,000 men. Israel by this time has an army of 100,000. And Israel's an army. And so it's 100,000. So what I'm trying to tell you is that if you totaled up the Syrian army plus the Iraqi army at that time, plus the the Lebanese army, plus the Egyptian army, you'll be surprised to hear that they're outnumbered by the Tzal. And this was the fundamental military reality in the early years of the State of Israel. It's not what people think. And so people like Ben-Gurion and the others can have a pugnacious attitude and a little bit of an arrogant attitude and all the rest of it, because it's based on the fact that Israel has, by the standards of that time, the strongest army in the Middle East. So much so that they could beat all the others put together if it was called for. You see? And so that's very important to understand. Furthermore, in the Arab countries, even the largest of the armies, the Egyptian army, was really run by the king for domestic purposes. In other words, let's put it this way. He's scared of his army because the officers of his army are guys like Nasser, who are planning to overthrow him and eventually do in 1952, as we all know. Therefore, he's not really interested in building up the army and making it very powerful, because if that happens, they won't. Before they attack Israel, they'll attack him. In spite of what I said, the general tendency of the times, and the Cold War, as we'll see, not tonight but some other night, the Cold War was of such a nature that the Egyptian army was built up anyway. And Ein Hanami, what happened? In 1952, they felt strong enough to knock out the king, right? They put him on the ship. He had his famous last words where he says, the day will come when the only ruler, the kings left in the world, the only queens left in the world be the Queen of England and the Queen of Hearts. See? He's the last king. Now I want to tell you something. He ran a fundamentally corrupt regime. That was very good for Israel. I'll tell you something else. During the years I'm talking about, his number one girlfriend, his number one mistress, you won't believe, was a Jewish girl named Lillian Cohn, who was Ashkenazic. She was an Egyptian movie star at that time. I'll tell you what, this is even better. I couldn't make this up. They used to be together, and he loved when she sang Yiddish songs. So you have King Farouk of Egypt, and she sang "Abriva der Mama," things like that. And he thought it was great. And now in Egyptian history, and for Nasser, she's a Mossad spy. As far as I'm aware, this is not true. But you understand, here's Israel just became a state, it's the Zionist enemy, it's this, that, and the other, and the king is literally in bed with a Zionist spy and all the rest of it. So this makes him very discredited in the Egyptian society and makes the Egyptian politics and the body politics turning over. I say this tonight, as we stand in the midst of a situation in Egypt, which is rioting going on because the new guy taking over is very different than him. He simply wants to get a Muslim dictator. Gee, what else is new in Egypt? And in that kind of environment, they're not really strong enough to go and make a war against Israel. And she would cry anyway. Okay? And the idea that she's singing a lullaby. Incidentally, just before he fell from power, she died in a plane crash. So if you're an Egyptian conspiracy theorist, the Mossad took her out. You figure out why. Okay. But anyway, the bottom line is, as I said before, that we look at the Israeli army led by these guys. They could take out all these Arab armies, 1, 2, 3, and they were eager to do so. Why do I say they were eager to do so? Because let's put it this way: Israel at that time would welcome an opportunity to expand. The Arabs are totally aware that if there's going to be a war between Egypt and Israel, the Israelis will take over the Gaza Strip, for example, as they end up doing when they had the first war in 1956 in the Sinai campaign. The Egyptians are well aware of this. The Jordanians are totally aware that if there's any kind of a war, they can take over the West Bank 1, 2, 3. And so Israel is small and weak and broke. Yes and no. You understand? And the years that we're talking about, Israel holds the cards, as it were, and a formal war was not in the cards. So Israel's fundamental problem with the Arabs was not one of a fear of an attack. Nevertheless, two fundamental problems existed and continue to exist. The first problem was that of infiltrators. Basically, I showed you the lousy borders that Israel ended up with as a result of the 1948-49 war. It's impossible to control all those borders. And from day one, actually from 48 in the time of the armistice, the Arabs just started coming back and moving back into Israel. Just, about hundreds of thousands. And what does one do? I mean, all along here. So, what is the Tzahal supposed to do exactly? This was the problem. That's why I keep harping. I know some people were angry at me because I'm criticizing the borders, but they're wrong. No, I'm serious. This is not doable. You get it? It's not doable. Now, if Israel had the Russian army, the Chinese army, you could put somebody every 15 feet. But and I know they don't have that kind of manpower. And so they didn't want to build an Arik Sharon wall at that time. Why not? That would work. That would mean that they're giving up any chance that they're going to take this over. You see? So political attitudes are funny in this way. But if you're not going to do that, then what exactly are you going to do? At the beginning, the Arabs come in just without a plan. What I'm trying to say is this is a mass movement. Where had they been expelled from? Here. Where'd they expel to? Here. Not far away. Most of the Arabs didn't get thrown out here and here. Some did. But most, and some here. But the vast majority of what we call the refugees end up here. I'll even go closer. Look what I'm doing. Right near the border. When the Arabs are expelled from right there from Ramla and Lud, they go here. You see what I'm saying? So here you have 50,000 people settled down over here. It's only natural that they're going to say, now the war's over, we're moving back here. And what exactly are you supposed to do? They're porous borders. And Israel doesn't have today masses of the border police to do it. And so that's why I keep saying, I know you laugh when I said they're wrong, but there are people who think that what I'm saying is incorrect, but they are wrong because it was an impossible situation. And by the way, if they have a peace treaty tomorrow, it will continue to be an impossible situation. What is the Israeli response supposed to be? This was the question that was faced already in 48, before the war was over. What are you supposed to do? Admit them? Send them back? If you send them back, it's a merry-go-round. The same people you send back come back tomorrow or the day after. But you have men, you have old people, you have women and children. What do? Shoot them. That's what they end up doing. After a little bit, I'm telling you, it's not a pretty picture. Ben Gurion, they give the orders out. He says, shoot them, men, women, children. This becomes Israel's sort of official policy. From then on, all throughout the 1950s and 60s. Anybody goes over the border, you shoot him. What if there's a kid? You shoot him. It's a good thing there's no CNN. No. It's not a great phenomenon. But what exactly are you supposed to do? This is why I keep harping and repeating over again what a mistake they made with the borders. Because bad borders leave you with very bad choices. You know, it's easy for us, and it is easy for us, to deplore, and it is deplorable, what I just described. And you are talking about killing kids, among other things like that. Think about that. But what is your alternative? And this is the problem. Now, somebody says there must be something better, and perhaps there was, but I'm telling you what actually happened. The Arab world, which is already embittered, is even more enraged. They would have been enemies anyway, but here they have daily situation in which, you know, men and women and children, they know people, they get killed. You see? Now, Israel takes the attitude like this: it's your fault, don't let them cross our border, and nothing will happen. I understand, but you understand the dynamic both ways. And it's a poisoned brew. It's just made to make things worse and worse and worse, which is another thing why I kept saying the lousy borders. They leave you with a situation in which things are worse and worse and worse all the time. Liberals are aware who are aware of the situation everywhere are outraged. However, there's no CNN. And so I'm going to give you an example right now for a minute or two of a very famous American liberal who is one of the people that cares about this, Dorothy Thompson, who, if you have any idea who she was a very famous journalist, one of the leading journalists in the United States, who was a big opponent of Hitlerism in the 30s, and was a big liberal in the 20s and 30s, and was a champion of the Jews during the Holocaust. And now she goes to Palestine, and she says, what the heck is going on over here? You see? And she's so angry about this that she, I think, and the Quakers were get together to make a movie. And take a look at this.
I'm Choppy, and I have been asked to introduce Sands of Sorrow because I think it is a truth and original theme of this picture we are about to see. Of course, the impression left on my mind by this wretched casualty of Jesus' shame is much more distressing than this room. For no stone can convey the icy winds of Mount Hermon as they blow upon streets flawless states in Syria, or the waves that turn valleys into mudpools from the railway stations in Lebanon. Nor does it simply feeling even those who are trying to help. But this shows us part of the story that until now has hardly been told before, outside the Arab world.
People, the Palestine Arab refugees, are struggling for survival. 750,000 displaced human beings are dependent upon the charity for their very existence. This is one of dozens of camps in which these refugees huddle in squalor. All are overcrowded.
It is a long movie, too. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, obviously. But you get the idea, right? Now, I'll tell you the good side of it, if I can use it in political terms. This, what came out in '49, TV was in its infancy. The 6:30 news didn't exist. You understand what I'm saying? And so this was only shown. Can you hear me? This was only shown in some churches and a couple places like that. It didn't get a big traction. The narrative that was out there was Israel's narrative. Now, there are two narratives. There are. You can't deny it. And this is a real story. Most people weren't aware of it. So there's a small elite of certain Protestant groups, such as the Quakers and the Presbyterians and the Episcopalians, who know about this and are very worked up about it. There's a couple of State Department types and things like Virginia Gildersleeve was the head of Barnard, and their people, some number of leading American elite types. But 99.9% of the rest of the American people only know about Abba Eban during these years. This is the plain story. I'm not saying this, somewhere else, but I'm saying it over here. And Israeli liberals, who are a tiny minority at that time, they object to the situation. But the silent majority in Israel agrees with Ben-Gurion. Here's Buber was the leading opponent and spokesman for those who say this is terrible, we're running a fascist state, and but he doesn't say what to do. But I repeat, what's the alternative? Right? Because if you let all the 750,000 Arabs in, that's the end of the Jewish state in and of itself. And so it's easy to say I'm in favor of Israel, and it's fun to look at the pictures of Ben-Gurion proclaiming the state and see the Israeli army winning the battles in 48. I get that, but you have to see both sides of the story, do you not? And then you're left with poor choices, right? Poor alternatives. This is all a result of the bad borders. Right? Now, much larger. So you see, it wasn't a matter of a war coming up, but here's just a plain problem that's not going to go away, and I'm not through with this tonight. A much larger fundamental problem for Israel is that the United Nations votes that the refugees must return, and also that the only borders they recognize are the 47 borders. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. This is the original borders that the United Nations resolution in 1947, November 47, granted for the Jewish state, what you see over here. As far as the United Nations is concerned, those are the legal borders of Israel. Anything they grab beyond that, they don't have a right to, unless it's done within the context of some kind of negotiation with the Arabs. Moreover, all those Arabs that were expelled, particularly from the parts that Israel took over, but even from Israel itself, Israel did not have a right under national law to expel them. And therefore all of them, I repeat, all of them must be returned. And this became part of international law. This is Israel's principal problem today. Hear what I said? I know about the military problems, and I know about Gaza, and I know about the rockets, and I know about all the other junk that's going on, and I even know about Iran and all the problems that are connected with there. Having heard that, you heard it from me, that's not Israel's number one problem. Israel's number one problem, and we're going to be seeing more of this, I'm afraid, my friends, is that under international law, under the United Nations Charter and resolutions, Israel does not have a right not to bring all the Arabs back. They have never given up on this, and they won't. They won't. And, you might say that they have hurt their cause for 65 years by insisting on violence. If they would have eschewed that, and starting in 1940-49, simply made it just a legal case. They said, we're not attacking anybody, we're not doing anything to anybody, we're simply, we say Israel can be there, but they have to follow the United Nations resolution, they would have got their goal long ago. Their refusal to go along with the 47 plan, even till today, or maybe they've changed their mind today, and to insist simply on applying the international law has been the best thing for Israel. It's sad, but these are the realities of it. It's the negotiating position at this moment in the year 2012 of the PLO. I'm talking about the most liberal of them, Abbas and all those people in the PA. Perhaps some of us will recall back in the year 2000, Clinton and his last moments of administration got together Arafat and Ehud Barak. Do you remember this? And Ehud Barak put everything on the table, didn't he not? I mean, I know many of you know what I'm talking about. And what was Arafat's response? He said, "But we don't want to give up on this. What I just told you." You see, and there you have it. Now, during the years I'm talking about, 49 to 52, Israel will be under great pressure to take back at least some refugees. Right? Even the best friends of Israel, like Truman, are saying it's, you don't take back 750,000, how much are you willing to take back? And at one point, the United States will pressure Israel to commit to take 100,000 back. It's in a country where they have 650 to start out, wasn't there? Taking another 650 in, as we saw last time in the Ma'abarot, and all the other terrible conditions. And in addition, and Israel already has 150,000 Arabs that they did not expel, which are therefore part of the Israeli citizens, and now add another 100,000, which is a huge extra addition. As I said before, in the original UN resolution, I mean, here's the history of it. In November 1947, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution saying that there are going to be two states and that they're supposed to cooperate. This is what it says in the nusach of the United Nations resolution. There are going to be two states and we want them to cooperate. Now, of course, we know that didn't happen. Israel started taking land and the Arabs started taking land right away in the fighting. And over the course of 1948. During that time, the Arab armies occupied, at one time or another, whole chunks of Israel to which they weren't exactly entitled. I'll give you an example. The Egyptian army took over the Negev, the whole Negev. The UN was silent. But by December of 1948, it was clear that Israel was winning, and that if anything, Israel would be taking extra Arab land. Also, by that time, it was clear that Israel was expelling many Arabs. Let's go to the next map. Right? So it's a lot much bigger, than the map you just saw, the Israeli part. At this point, in December of 48, the General Assembly of the United Nations, influenced by the views of the late Count Bernadotte, who the Jews had murdered, the Stern Gang assassinated him, they passed Resolution 194, which remains in force today, and this resolution has been renewed every year since then by the General Assembly. Okay? Renewed every year. So, I know these numbers don't mean anything to us, but they mean things to people in the Middle East. So the two resolutions you want to remember is 189 and 194. 189 was the partition resolution of 1947, establishing the two states, and 194 was a year later, in which they said Israel has to, as I said before, take back all the refugees and a couple of other things like this. Has several points. Among them, one is the protection and free access to the holy places. Another one is the demilitarization and the United Nations control over Jerusalem, and the free access to Jerusalem. Notice Yerushalayim should be a separate city administered by the United Nations and not part of Israel. And the other one, and Article 11 is what do you call it? That's the key one. Let's take a look. Read it. It resolves that the refugees wishing to return to their homes and live at peace with their neighbors should be permitted to do so at the earliest practical date, and that compensation should be paid for the property of those choosing not to return, and for loss or damage to property which under principle of the law or inequity should be made good by the governments responsible, and instructs the Conciliation Commission. So the United Nations, in this resolution, established something called the Arab-Israeli Conciliation Commission. We'll see in a minute. To facilitate the repatriation, the resettlement, and economic and social rehabilitation of refugees, and the payment of compensation, and the close relationship, etc., etc., etc. Now, Israel, of course, said like this: we sign in for compensation, right? We sign in for reparations, we sign in for everything except for repatriation. You understand, right? And that's Israel's position till today. And being very legalistic, they say, we don't believe that these guys want to live at peace with their neighbors. You see? But of course, the refugees said, we do. And there you have it, my friends, till today. So you're going to be, I wish I was wrong, and I wish other things would be in the papers, but I fear that I'm right, especially now in Obama's second term. And as you know, the PA is going to the United Nations as we speak to get some kind of observer, semi-nation status, and France already said they're voting for him. You see where this is going. We're going to see a revival in the news of, Resolution 194, back in the very beginning of December 1948, and you're going to see Israeli spokesmen saying, well, they don't want to live at peace with their neighbors, and so on and so forth, but Israel will pay compensation, right? And now Israel says like this, but what about compensation for the Jews who left the Arab countries? But the Arab countries are going to say, we didn't kick them out, you took them, right? Well, it's true, and they're going to say, when it comes to Iraq, you kind of forced them out, you blew up the synagogues to freak them out and make them go to Israel. You're going to get all this sort of stuff coming out in Time Magazine and CNN and all this other kind of business, because, as we know, the past is the father of the present. Right? So there you have it. I repeat, this is the official position of PLO today. Will the world side with the PLO on this? I'll ask you a more comfortable question. Will President Obama? I don't know. In addition, the resolution established, as you see, the UNCC, the United Nations Conciliation Commission, consisting of 3 countries, the USA, France, and Turkey. Well, at that time, this is what the UN, I'm just telling you what happened. From January until April of 49, January, February, March, April, these 3 countries sent delegates, and they went to the Middle East, and they consulted with all the principals, including the Palestinian refugees. So they went to Israel, they went to Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and so forth, and they consulted on how to put together some kind of a peace conference. During this time is when Israel was signing the armistice agreements at Rhodes. That's only because the Israeli army beat the pants off the Egyptians and surrounded their army in the Fallujah pockets. The Egyptians were afraid that the Egyptian army would be compelled to surrender. Jordan was scared because Israel had put itself in a position that they could occupy, really wipe out the Arab Legion. Lebanon was scared. In other words, there's something called the armistice agreements, which had to do with the ceasefires. And then everybody figured, including the United Nations and Israel and all the others, that the armistice agreements will obviously be followed by a peace conference. And so the United Nations Conciliation Commission at that time said, while this was going on, okay, you guys handle the specifics of the armistice at Rhodes under the direction of Dr. Ralph Bunche, the American famous delegate, and when it comes to the actual peace conference, let's go to Lausanne in Switzerland. And we'll have something called the Lausanne Conference. And if you know history, there have been many peace conferences in Lausanne. It's a nice place, it's a resort, and let's do it over there. Israel's scared. We all have a long history. They go to peace, everybody gangs up on them. That's the way they saw it. They didn't want to implement this stuff. You see? Ben Gurion and all these others were scared. The purpose of the conference is true to make peace, but also to admit all the Arab refugees, which would end Israel ipso facto. Also, the purpose of the Lausanne Conference is to enforce the internationalization of Jerusalem. It even says there in another part of the resolution, Jerusalem includes Hebron, includes Shuafat, includes Abu Dis. They lay out the areas over there, okay? And borders, who knows? Let's go to the next one. I mean, they're scared to death. They're going to push for the 1947 borders. And so Israel does not want to go. But the United Nations makes it clear that participation in the Lausanne Conference is a condition for being admitted as a member nation in the United Nations. And Israel, especially this time, is desperate for legitimacy. Maybe too much so, but you understand why. They were desperate for legitimacy, and the ultimate mark of legitimacy in the international system is to become a recognized member of the United Nations organization. I might also add that this is early 49. This is their last chance, because afterwards comes in all the third world countries, and they're going to vote against Israel. And just imagine, in addition to all the other troubles we had today, Israel was an outlaw nation which wasn't a member of the United Nations. I mean, that's all we need. And so Israel is scared, and they agree. They say, we will participate in the Lausanne Conference, and as a result, they become a member of the United Nations on May 11th, 1949, with the strong support, and only with the strong support, of Russia and America. Right? The Russians gave it the full press, this is a fact, and so did the United States, despite the opposition of the British. Here, let's take a look at a newsreel from that time celebrating this. See, that's what I like about newsreels. They don't tell you anything, because the real reason is because they have been forced to do this in order to join the Lausanne. They joined. This is the price of admission if you want to. I said it wrong. To joining the Lausanne Conference and agreeing to the admission of the Arab refugees and change of the border is the price to get this. Okay, and so Israel have to, what they say in Yiddish, have to funfa. Okay, and the result is that Israel sends its #1 diplomatic specialist to Lausanne. That's this guy, Eliosa Son. This was a little bit later in life. He is, for many years, for decades, Israel's expert in the Arab world. Eliosa Son is a Sephardi Jew. You can tell by the name. He's born in Damascus, right? He actually goes to an Arab school. He moves eventually to Palestine in the 1920s. He's a Zionist, but he went to Arab University, to St. Joseph University in Lebanon, and so not only does he speak Arabic, but he grows up with Arabs. And therefore, he's kind of a bridge, because Ben Gurion and Sharet and these other guys talk Yiddish, they don't really know. Sharet knew a little bit of Arabic, but the other guys didn't know any of this stuff. And even though they live side by side with them, they look at the Arabs as Yena, you know what I mean, the others, and really they have no connection with them. And therefore, you need somebody who's, so to speak, one of them, or something like that. And Sassoon, therefore, in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, meets everybody. It's like Forrest Gump. He meets everyone in Egypt and Syria and Lebanon and Jordan and Iraq and even beyond that. It's actually quite remarkable. And he's a very fascinating person because he understands both sides. And he's always angry that Israel isn't making sufficient concessions. But as the Israeli guy, he's got to do his part to represent the Israeli side. And so he will go to the Lausanne conference, and even out of that, he's constantly talking to the Arabs. What I'm trying to tell you is it's not true that the Arabs boycotted Israel, as formally they did, but informally they didn't. And there were always constant conversations going on between Israeli representatives on one hand and various Arab representatives on one hand, all during these years. But they always run into a brick wall, because there's not really any a meeting of the minds between the two sides, and it's kind of frustrating for him and all that sort of thing. And I can just tell you that Eliyahu Sassoon holds many off-the-record, as they say, conversations with various Arab diplomats. Publicly, they shun him, and they've declared that they will under no circumstances recognize Israel. But privately, they speak to him. And we have the records of these conversations, but it's not going anywhere. And I'll tell you why. What you have in these off-the-record conversations is, okay, maybe we'll make peace with you, but A, you have to take the refugees back, and B, you have to give up land. And the best he can get is, okay, so you don't have to take the refugees back, that's big, but give us the negative. You see what I'm saying? Or something like that. In which it's a substantial business of yielding. I mean, Egypt said that. They said, okay, you don't have to take the refugees back, which is a big deal. It is. We'll handle that, but give us half the country, or more than half. And, because we don't want to be separated from the rest of the Arabs. The Lausanne conference had basic structural defects. There was no direct official negotiations. The Arabs said, we won't talk to Israel directly. And so the Arabs were in one room, and the Israelis were in another room, and the UN guys are going back and forth. I mean, right off the bat, it's technisch. That's not a peace conference. You understand? Second of all, the Arabs negotiated in a block. And so once it's in a block, it's not country to country, it's a group. Once it's a group, everybody has to show how religious they are compared to the others, and therefore they give the hardest position. All of this helped Israel, didn't it? What I'm trying to tell you is, if the Arabs would play their cards right, it's like this. We recognize Israel, we agree to the borders, now put all the refugees back, and we'll sit back and see what happens. See? They weren't smart enough. I understand why it's emotion, but they weren't smart enough to do that. Again, all this kind of intransigence is going to be one of Israel's most potent weapons in the first 19 years of their existence, to be perfectly honest. They're always able to say, see, they won't talk to us, they won't this, that, and not serious about peace, and all the rest of it. Privately, the Arabs do indicate, as I said before, that they will make peace. But, A, you have to take their refugees, or B, land, or one or the other. Refugees, by definition, is going to kill Israel. Land is not so pashut, correct? It depends how much, where, when, and all the rest of it. But because they do say this, you'll find pressure on Israel from these two guys. The President of the United States, Secretary of State. Truman, you can't say was anti-Israel. It's not true. And even Atchison he wasn't pro-Israel, but he wasn't anti-Israel. Very interesting guy. But there are ideas like this. Take the deal. I mean, what Israel needs more than anything else is to be recognized as a regular country by the Middle East. Then they can't harm you after that, because you'll be a United Nations member and it'll be illegal to attack you. I mean, it's the argument. You hear the point. I mean, it's not a stupid point, right? On the other hand, what are they supposed to say? He said, we take back 700,000 refugees, that wipes out Israel just by that. And so Atchison said, well, then take in some, or whatever. Truman appointed a personal envoy, Mark Etheridge, who was a very famous Democratic macher. He was a big newspaper publisher. He was a big deal under Roosevelt, and it was a big deal under Truman that he from Louisville, Kentucky. He had a chain of newspapers, and he said, you go to the Middle East and talk to them and get them to do what's right. And Esrich goes there and twists arms. And as a result, Israel did agree, Moshe Sharet did agree to take back 100,000 refugees, Arab refugees. Ben-Gurion, I don't know where he went nuts. And Ben-Gurion had a conversation with Esrich, and he said like this, give us the Gaza Strip, and we'll take in all the Arabs in the Gaza Strip. As over 250,000, it's close to 300,000. I don't know what Ben-Gurion was drinking that day, but, you know, boy, if Egypt would say that, imagine. I mean, I do understand the idea of Israel annexing the Gaza Strip. I get that, especially as we live here today at the Hamas situation. But what would Israel do with close to 300,000 Arab refugees at that time? But anyway, this is the kind of negotiations that are going back and forth in 1949, in that very interesting summer of 1949. But ultimately, these are half solutions, because the Arabs don't want to take back half the refugees, a quarter refugees. It's all or nothing from their point of view. That's what they are insisting on justice. They're insisting on honor. What you have to understand is the Arab culture is a culture of honor. Let me give you an example. In English, you say like this, to your health, or l'chaim in Hebrew, or in European, santé, right? What do they say in Arabic? To your honor. You get it? This is the deal to them. The existence of Israel, dishonor. The fact that you have all these refugees out there, the Arabs are supposed to be the master race. They're the ones that conquered the Middle East in the 600s. They're supposed to be the top dogs ever since then. And they're the ones sitting over here, and the Jews are the ones sitting in the cities. It goes in the kishkas, and there is the heart of the problem. Right in the middle of all this, you had the following situation. This guy, who looks like Mussolini because he modeled himself on him, grabbed power in Syria. He said, this was in the middle of, right in the middle of what we're talking about, in April, May, June, July, August, September, 49. He said like this, if Israel gives me back a little bit of land, I'll take in the refugees. Atchison said, I guess, grab the deal now. Right? Atchison was a big lawyer, you know, a very famous lawyer in Covington and Burling. He said, take the deal now. What does he want, though? Let's see. 1 second. Do we have the map there? Let's go to the map first. No, the one of the Syrian border? Yeah. Go past that. Okay. Yeah, over here. Here you have the old Israeli 1948-49 border with Egypt. With Syria, excuse me. Look closely. You know, this is the Galilee. I get it, right? You get that. And here's the Kinneret, and here is the other thing, the Hula, you know. What? The Golan is here, in Syria. Right, here's the Banyas, you know. Here's everything I'm pointing here is the Golan. Okay? It was part of Syria. This is not after the 67 war, this is before the 67 war. But look very closely. Here's the Jordan River. Oh, there's a little strip of Israel on beyond the Jordan River, isn't there? Right? Look, you can't quite see it here. You can't quite see it here, but look at this. On the other side of the Sea of Galilee is Israel also. And look where I'm pointing right now with my pointer. There's a 10 feet, 10 meters along here, Israel. Get it? Why? Because back in what I'm telling you is the heart today of the Israel-Syria problem. Back in the 1920s, when England and France split up the Middle East, so they said England gets something called Palestine, France gets something called Syria, Lebanon. And then then British and French diplomats got together in the early 20s to make the exact line. Okay? The Zionists wanted this wanted that. They ended up with what they ended up. Syria is a big area, has, for example, in it the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, among others. Palestine, I'm talking about from the British point of view, doesn't have many rivers. And so they agreed at that time, the British and the French, there's horse trading. We'll give you this, you give us that. Meaning that the line is that the whole of the Jordan River, as you see, is Israel, not Syria. And more importantly, this thing over here is a body of water that they need here that Palestine needs for water. Syria has the Tigris, Euphrates rivers, and other stuff. And the British and the French negotiators split it that way. That became the international border when that agreement was registered with the League of Nations. and subsequently was readopted. All the borders of the League of Nations were readopted by the United Nations. If you're an international law person, you know about this. If you're a regular person, there's no reason to know about it, unless you're an Israeli, unless you're a Syrian. So the Syrians are Shrine Chai V'Chaim till today. Who gave them the right to do what I just told you? To make all of this not part of Syria. That the Syrians have no legal, no legal right to take a drop of water from the Kinneret, because the Israeli border goes up to and beyond here, beyond the Sea of Galilee. 10 meters. So that's simply to establish that it's not part of Syria. I can tell you the Syrians have been enraged about this ever since, that they claim it's illegal. Assad, the father, when he was younger, used to go, before the 6 a.m. war, this is what he said anyway, come and have picnics over here and go swimming just to show he can do it. You see? And it's a big deal if you're Syrian. Okay? I might also add here also, this territory was, when I'm pointing beyond on the other side of the Jordan River, was full of Arabs. And it was, this is something I'll talk about maybe next year, but it's not in 48, 52, but it happens in 53. This area over here was all Arabs and was declared a demilitarized zone. At a certain point in the 50s, when nobody was looking, or they thought nobody was looking, Israel expelled all these Arabs into Syria. You see? So if you're Syrian, you know this. Most people don't know this, but they don't forget. And they say, hey, that wasn't fair. This is just supposed to be a demilitarized zone. Israel said, demilitarized zone means it's Israel, and totally Israel can do whatever we want there. So Ben-Gurion had this hardball kind of policy, and the results are what they are. And so there's total lack of any kind of consensus on this business. This is why under Assad, Clinton's time, remember they had met in Maryland, I think, and a place like that in the Y plantation. Yeah, and and this was exactly it. The Syrians said, well, we want to be a riparian state. We want to get rid of those 10 meters, and that we should be part of this. And Israel till today said no, because then we lose half our rights there, and Syria can take the water, and under international law, then they have the power to go up there. I don't know what, that makes them a whole different business under international law. And Israel has been trying to hold on to that, and their argument is, this is the international border. Syria says the international border was done without Syrians being consulted. It was the British and the French, and therefore we got deprived of what we really are entitled to. Why am I giving this whole little schmooze, besides the fact that it's interesting and relevant to the current day? When the dictator, Zaim, seizes power in 1949, he says to Israel, he said to Ben-Gurion, I'll take in all the refugees, you give me that. Right? Atchison, so I guess, take it. If you get a genuine peace treaty with Syria, the real thing you've been looking for, that they totally recognize you, have ambassador, have the whole full diplomatic trade, the whole 9 yards, and they're taking all the refugees. I mean, come on. You see? And Ben-Gurion said no. For a number of reasons. First of all, in principle, he didn't do what I just told you. He didn't want to give that up. Right? Second of all, for some reason, he didn't consider Zaim to be a long-running guy, which was true. He got knocked out of power a couple months later. And he said, we'll give away a permanent thing, and it'll turn out to be a temporary concession. You hear that too. But on the other hand, if the United States State Department, in 1949, Israel appears unreasonably intransigent. And you can definitely hear it. So I'm just trying to show you the Middle East was a tricky business if you lived in those days. What can I tell you? And that's why, I'll show you the next picture, and so take it a little bit later. When Ben-Gurion visits Washington, you know how it goes. For the cameras, you all smile. But then when the camera's away, then comes out the fangs. So here's a Ben-Gurion visiting Atchison in the State Department. All right, we'll see. There you go. Oops. I took the sound off. If you listen to the sound, this is Israeli propaganda. So, the Prime Minister met with Atchison to discuss peace and democracy and all the rest of it. You see how tall they are. But, okay. And Atchison was, I've spoken about before, was a very interesting guy, very brilliant lawyer, and everybody's smiling. But, that's for the cameras, right? Really, when the camera's over, he says, what are you guys doing? This is, if I had a client and they were offered this kind of a deal, I'd say, grab it. No, I'm telling you as your friend. You see what I'm saying? And as I say before, you can hear both sides, so it's not simple at all. But as I told you, Ben-Gurion said, I don't think Zaim will last, and he didn't. And he didn't want to pay the price in the business. Similarly, Ben-Gurion doesn't want to yield the Negev to King Farouk. He says, I don't want to pay the price of the Negev. That's where Israel's putting all their future plans in and their hopes. It's the only open areas we know. And in Ben-Gurion's time, they had the idea, which has not happened till today, they move millions of Jews into the Negev, and they'll build it up. He spoke very lyrically about all that sort of thing. But lyrics is one thing, and reality is another. And that's what happened. Truman said, and Mark Etheridge, how about a corridor through the Negev? And that's what I end up talking about. Let's go to the next map. Yeah. What about this? Or something like that. Right? That won't take away the whole Negev, but just there should be a zone, like, for example, here to here, belong to Egypt, like the Danzig corridor was in before World War II. And that way Egypt will have its tainas, and how about that? Ben-Gurion said no. So in other words, the bottom line is that he did not want to make any concessions whatsoever in territory, even to get a peace. Not that we know if it will really work, but the reason you don't know if it will work is because unless you put it on the table, you can't tell. This drove Truman and Atchison crazy, because they said like this, we're on your side, and you're not being reasonable. The old problem of every president of the United States with the state of Israel. And Truman at that time said in 1949, should we threaten Israel? In other words, they said, should we cut off the money? Should we do this and that and the other? What to do to get Israel? I want you to understand, it's like Obama. I want to pressure Israel because I'm their best friend. That mentality. I understand, but to be perfectly honest, that's the way he saw it. I wouldn't say that Harry S. Truman was anti-Israel. You can't say that, right? On the other hand, the way he saw it, he says this is the only way you'll get some kind of peace over there. But there are many factors that inhibited that. First of all, Truman, at that point, was not a politically strong president. If you know the history of the United States, we've had our strong presidents, your weak ones. Harry S. Truman was a weak president. He didn't have strong power on Capitol Hill and places like that. I know it's Gimel Harry, I know all the stories and all the rest of it, and I like Truman also, but if you want to be perfectly honest, he wasn't able to get any of his legislation passed. He did have that squeaker victory, the surprise victory of 1948 over Tom Dewey. We all know that famous picture of Truman holding up the newspaper, etc. But once he got in office in 1949, he wasn't really able to get anything passed. He won the Civil Rights Bill. He had something called the Fair Deal legislation, and the Congress wouldn't do it. And so, and there you have it. In addition to that, Truman was a human being, and he was affected, right? Is this okay? Can you see with this? Yeah. I don't want to hurt my microphones. How we know? Is it better? Okay. Yeah. No. Let me know if it's a problem. It's also true that even though he was annoyed with Israel, Truman was fundamentally sympathetic with Israel. That's a fact. Especially, Israel sent a secret weapon. The secret weapon was Chaim Weizmann, who visited Truman in the summer, just at this time before. Now you know the reason why Weizmann came to America in there, because he knew that Truman probably would be turned off by a guy like Ben-Gurion, who was a turnoff. Ben-Gurion was a big turnoff to people, if you know who he was. Foreigners, I mean. And Chaim Weizmann was the opposite. Let's take a look at this for a second.
Weizmann has been trying to get in all along, and I wouldn't let him in. But someone did come to see me, and he got in. This man was moving on to the
Well, let's stop it right there. This is not the one I wanted to. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm sorry. This is the wrong video. It's okay. In '49, Weizmann comes to the White House. That's where he gives him the famous Sefer Torah that we've all seen over there. And I always love this. When he gives Truman Sefer Torah, when you're president, he said, "What do you say?" He gives Truman a Torah, and Truman said, "I always wanted one of these." You know what I'm saying? But I have to tell you a better story. In 1952, Rabbi Leo Young, we remember Rabbi Leo Young, many of us, right? Said Rabbi Leo Young, he was backing Menachem Kasher making the Torah Shlema. That's that famous Torah encyclopedia of all the Chazals on the Pesukim. And at that time, somebody had the idea, put out in English. So they put out one time in 1952 an English volume of the Torah Shlema. It has all the Midrashim and all the Chazals on Parshas Bereishis. And he went to the White House for some reason or other, and he gave one, it's a picture of it, he gives one to Truman. Truman says, I always wanted one of these. Right? But more important than this is this guy, Eddie Jacobson. This is really taken from 1948, and I wanted to, I'll move on to the other one to tell you about that in a second. In April 1949, Truman, who, as I say before, was annoyed but fundamentally sympathetic, so he so he sends a special envoy to report at the situation in Israel, Eddie Jacobson, right? And Truman gives him a color camera, movie camera. Okay? Do you remember many of us in the old days when they had such things as color movie cameras? When you come back from Israel, what do? You show it. You have a show. You show all your relatives and your friends that you drive them crazy, right? So you all remember that. Wait a second. Eddie Jacobson, who after all was a schnook, he was a haberdasher. He wasn't a big deal in the American Jewish community. But when he comes to Israel, they give him a VIP treatment. It's actually, it'll take too long to show the whole business. They give him an army parade. They take him around to all the business. And Chaim Weizmann gives him a guided tour of the Weizmann Institute. Okay? Now I wonder why. Because he has one asset, and that asset, of course, he's the best friend, or one of the closest friends, and the most powerful guy in the world. Let's go to the next one. Not this one. Yeah, that's it. Here's Chaim Weizmann giving him the guided tour of the. There's the haberdasher and his wife, right? Oh boy, they get into full treatment. Okay, you can't get better that time than Chaim Weizmann take you around the Weizmann Institute and show you everything, right? And of course, it's all with a color camera, which is very expensive, right? Weizmann show them where we're going to put the new buildings and all that kind of business, and that's the wife over there. She's a nobody. That's Chaim Weizmann's wife over there. They're giving her the red carpet treatment. Okay, it's really wonderful. And when he comes back, this is the best part. When he comes back, he goes to the White House. He shows Truman the pictures over there. You see? So there's me. That's called Tel Aviv. You see? Here's an Arab cow and so forth. And then Truman says, I send a special envoy to report on the situation in the Middle East. So why am I giving you this whole business? Why I give this whole business? He's not going to really. He could say he's going to pull the plug in Israel. He's not going to really pull the plug in Israel. Truman is not going to do that. He's not going to really cut off the aid. It's not going to happen. You understand? But for nothing else, he's not going to get this guy crying. And Atchison, who wrote a very brilliant memoir, it's called President to Creation. It's a very famous book, won the Pulitzer Prize. He wrote it in 1968. He says over there, he says, listen, I love President Truman, which is true. They had an unusual relationship of respect and affection. This is like the gold standard of President and Secretary of State, if you're an American history buff. And he knew Truman as the pluses and the minuses. This is what he says. And he said President Truman was a great man, and we got a lot done with NATO and all this other business in the Cold War. But when it came to policy in Israel, he said like this: we just had to make peace with the fact that when it comes to the foreign policy in the Middle East, the United States Department of State did not have as much influence as Eddie Jacobson. That's what he says. You see? Go figure that out. Thirdly, the United States ambassador to Israel at that time was more pro-Israel than the Israelis. James G. McDonald was Truman's ambassador. Is the sound working? James Grover McDonald, in other words, he's not Jewish, was more than pro-Jewish. You understand? And I'm going to show you a clip in a second that I found the other day where he's interviewed on a TV show in 1951, right? I mean, at the very beginning of television, they must have had some kind of a show where they interview people, and it wasn't, no, it's way before that. He says, no, this is a show you never heard of. And the point is that they're going to ask him, tell us about Israel. He said, they're taking a lot of refugees. And I didn't even show you the whole thing because it's a long interview, but later on they asked him, he says, what is Israel planning to do with the tremendous economic problems and things like that they're having from this improvident taking in of too many people, and the country doesn't have enough to eat? And he says, people have to buy Israel bonds. You understand? So here, take a look at this for a second.
And some of the progress that it's made. So I'd like to begin by asking you the question which it seems to me most Americans are interested in or most troubled about, and and that is, do you think that Israel and the Arab states would be able to work out a real peace?
I think there will be no war between Israel and the Arab states.
The situation now is an armistice, is that what?
There is an armistice with each of the four immediate neighbors, with Egypt, with Jordan, with Syria, and with Lebanon. But I do not anticipate that these armistices will actually be transformed into treaties of peace in the near future.
Why is that?
Because the Arabs, for the most part, see no reason for making peace. They're standing pat. And they, I think, mistakenly hope that Israel will fall of its own weight because of the vast number of Jewish immigrants that have been coming to the country and because of the economic burdens which the new state now bears.
It's a very interesting interview. Time precludes me from showing the whole thing, but you get the idea. The State Department was always complaining. He's supposed to be the American ambassador in Israel, not Israel's ambassador to the State Department, but that's what he was. He was James G. McDonald was a very great man. He was the head of Foreign Policy Association in the 1920s and 30s. That's the WASPy group. He was one of the closest friends of Eleanor Roosevelt. He was a big deal in the Democratic Party, a big deal in the New York Times. He was not a little person, a strong Roman Catholic. And in 1933, I don't know if you remember this, no reason to, in 33 and 34, FDR had gotten him appointed as the League of Nations Commissioner for Refugees, which means Jewish refugees, and he went around from country to country back in those days trying to get him in the Jewish refugees. And in those days, it was the St. Louis. They wouldn't let anybody in. No country would take anything in. And James G. McDonald had been pro-Germany in First World War, so he was popular in Germany when Hitler came to power, and he had a very interesting conversation a month or two after Hitler came to power in 1933, and Hitler spoke to him frankly because he looked at him as a friend, and McDonald said something like, what's the story with the Jews? And he says, I'm going to show the world how it's possible to kill all the Jews and nobody will do anything about it. And McDonald said, he had a conversation person to person. He looked in his eyes, and he could tell at that time he's serious, and he reported back to Roosevelt, the State Department. Of course, nothing happened, and he had the experience of just sitting through the next decade and seeing all of his worst fears come to fruition. The reason I'm mentioning this is here's a person who had an unusual understanding of Israel's security fears and an unusual understanding of the necessity for the Jewish people to have a state of some kind because the alternative is another Holocaust, and that necessity trumps the Arab refugee question. I mean, he was in favor of settling the Arab refugees in a fair way also, but it's got to be that there's some room for a Jewish state that the Jews won't end up in another Hitler time. So he was an unusual person to be appointed United States ambassador to Israel. He's the only one like that. But he was the first ambassador to Israel from 48 to 51. It was a long time. And therefore, in 49, he was telling Truman all these things. He said, you can't cut Israel off. They might end up going communist, or they'll go under. The Arabs will crush them, and so on and so forth. And so, on the one side, Truman is getting all this advice from the State Department, but on the other side, he's getting a lot of advice in the opposite direction as well. So the result is that Israel is able to be an artful dodger during these years, and by the time it's all over, they took in 32,000 refugees in 1949. That's what they're able to get away with. Mark Etheridge resigns in disgust, but there's no CNN. The Arab narrative doesn't get out there. That's just the way it is. Even though you can see Dorothy Thompson types, but it doesn't get into as far as the average person in America is concerned, there's gallant little Israel, and the Arabs are beating up on them, etc., etc. The Lausanne conference simply peters out over the course of the year. But, on the other hand, many Arab refugees just moved back to Israel, tens of thousands of them undetected, because Israel, I'll talk about that next week, they try to get control of the situation. It's not easy. The only way that Israel can get, realistically, to stop the infiltration or the moving back by the Arabs in any kind of numbers is with the cooperation of the Arab governments themselves, which is not going to happen. And so there is no other way. There is something as a result of the armistice treatment, people don't know this, that they call the MAC, the MACs, the Mixed Armistice Commissions. Under the terms of the Rhodes Agreements, the armistice commissions, there were formal bodies called the Israeli army and the Egyptian army and the UN. The Israeli army and the Jordanian army and the UN. The Israeli army and the Syrian army and the UN. The Israeli army and the Lebanon army and the UN. They have a meeting of 3 people, and they had formal meetings like every week. And there were constant conferences over there, and what it degenerated into, the Arabs accused this, Israel accused that, they lied to each other, and at the end, Israel's the one that shut them down. It's funny, because here again, you had at least the possibility of direct negotiations at some level that could be built up higher, and Ben-Gurion and his guys, the army guys, little by little shut it down. It wasn't a pretty picture. There are a whole literature of books out there that came out in the 50s of these UN guys that were there, and they come back and they all write these books against Israel. General Riley, the lieutenant general from the Marine Corps, ran this operation. There was a Major von Horn from the Swedish Army. There's General Burns from the Canadian Army. But as I say, these books don't get traction. They don't get written that much. They're there for a little bit on the New York Times list, and then they're gone. And so during these periods, Israel wins the information war in a big way. That leaves us with one last part of this, and a very important part of the story, King Abdullah. He's the only ruler who's serious about cutting a deal with Israel. Why? He's anxious to consolidate his gains because they're equally illegal. Right? Abdullah grabbed the West Bank and half of Jerusalem. Legally, he had no title to it. Understand this well. The United Nations had set up, it should be a Jewish state and a Palestinian state. There was a Jewish state set up, and there was no Palestinian state set up. Instead, the Jordan grabbed it. You understand? Now, the argument was, in 48, the Arabs went along, if the Jordanian army doesn't grab it, if the Palestinians, they showed they're a bunch of boobs, and Israel will take them over 1, 2, 3. So they kind of went along. But on the other hand, they're being taken over by Jordan. And so you end up with this kind of funny situation. The reason is there is no Palestinian state is because the United Nations kind of acquiesces, don't they, in Abdullah's annexation of the West Bank. Israel is kind of happy in some respect that he grabs half of Jerusalem, because one of the big stories of this year, 49 and 50, is that the United Nations makes a big push under the Vatican, and I forgot the name of the number of the resolution. They put a resolution that Israel has to give up Jerusalem, or let me put it differently. They make that the United Nations resolution that Israel should be treated as a separate body administered by the United Nations should be put into effect. And all the countries voted for it, including Russia and America, by the way. If Israel would be the sole possessor of Jerusalem, I can tell you now there would be no chance that they would be able to resist that. But because Abdullah had half the city, and he said, I'm not giving up, Israel could say, well, they're not giving up, we're not giving our part up. And the UN wasn't going to tangle with the Arab world to take half of Jerusalem away from an Arab ruler, and so that's the reason it didn't happen. It's kind of funny. But, politics is very strange. Abdullah had been maneuvering for a deal with Israel since 1947, but he's a very slippery character, as you can kind of see. This is the Arab world of the old school, and maybe the new, in which a deal lasts as long as it's in my interest to keep up the deal. And so, he had big plans, but his plans were a little crazy, but it was good for Israel. His plans was like this: make a deal now with Israel, get them off my back, let me have a peace treaty so they won't bother me, and then I can carry my real goal, which is to conquer Syria and then Iraq, because he never gave up the hope from Lawrence of Arabia that his family, the Hashemite dynasty, would have one giant Arab state. And then I'm sure in the back of his mind, once they do all that, then we'll worry about the Israel thing. This is the long-term plans. And he was 75 or 74. But that didn't matter. And so the point is, as far as Israel is concerned, right now he is willing to sign a peace treaty with them. This was very unpopular with his subjects. If you read about the secret meetings that he has with Eliyahu Sasson and Moshe Sharet and the others, he basically tells his own ministers, you got to meet with the Israelis. We don't want you to meet the Israelis. He hits them over the head and says, you have to meet with them, and we have to sign this or that. The problem is he wasn't working within a consensus. It was like a one-man deal, and that's why Ben-Gurion is very afraid of this. But on the other hand, he does offer no return of the refugees. So here we have the old model. I want territorial concessions, but no return of refugees. Now, what does he mean by territorial concessions? Well, in the beginning, he said, I want the negative. Fingers up, forget that. So by the time you cut this down, the Israeli negotiations are dicey, but I'll tell you what what comes out. Let's see the next map. He says that he wants either here or up here, like I told you before, a corridor. That'll be Jordanian territory to the sea, and he'll take over this, for example, and this. And if Israel agrees with that, they'll have a full peace treaty. They don't have to take back any of the refugees. Again, that's a big deal. And Israel will have peace with a very important player in the Middle East. Israel kind of agrees to this, but then they get in arguments how wide. Moshe Sharet said, you mean like a little corridor over here? He said, no, I mean like a big corridor. Right? You see? And they really got into negotiations over how wide and how this and that and the other. And once again, I'm sorry to say, my friends, I strongly suspect that we'll be hearing about this in the near future, because if the UN is going to have an Arab state, it's going to be a state composed of this and this. And if that's true, they're going to argue that they're not contiguous. And Israel will say, we'll let you go across. No, we want a corridor. You see? I understand that. But nevertheless, this is where the international pressure is going to go, and who do you think the international pressure is going to favor? Not who you want to favor. I'm just telling you that what's weird about this is the old issues are old, and this is not something you learn from Time magazine. You just have no. It didn't start today and it didn't start yesterday. It goes back a long way, and they have never given up on a piece of this, and negotiations end up breaking down over the size. And so Abdullah says, then let's instead have a non-aggression treaty between Israel and Jordan for 5 years, because he wants the assurances that he can attack Syria and these other countries, and Israel won't interfere. That's where things were holding when he was shot. Because in July of 51, he was killed by a cousin of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. You see, when he was in Jerusalem visiting the mosque. What's the message? The message is clear. No negotiations with the Jews, and anybody who violates that consensus will get shot, unless the negotiations are based on a return of the refugees and the 1947 borders. Israel's negotiations with Abdullah, on the other hand, bought them breathing space. They were able to say to Truman and Atchison in the second half of 49, all during 50 and all during 51, we are in serious negotiations, which they were, and America and England monitored this all very closely, and all this stuff can be found in the State Department archives, every meeting, and all this can be found in the British Foreign Archives, every meeting, and basically what's going over there. But this takes some of the pressure off, because, see, we're not so intransigent. We are negotiating in good faith. It's not easy, you know. And Truman Atchison saying, no. You and I know it wasn't going to go anywhere. Ultimately, however, the main cause for the relief of the pressure on Israel was not the negotiations between Abdullah and Israel. The main cause of negotiations between Israel starts in 1950 with the outbreak of the Korean War in June 1950 and the tremendous intensification of the Cold War and America going through this guy. When this happens, Truman has many other things on his mind. Atchison is the main target. I don't know if you know this or not. From 50 to 52, Atchison was under unbelievable criticism every single day, and Truman dug in his heels and said, I won't fire him. And then Truman got into trouble, and in that kind of a world, the Israel thing gets pushed to the back burner. You see? That's exactly what happened over there. And so the bottom line is that Israel's attitude during this years, and with this I can conclude, Israel's attitude in this years was better no peace at all than a peace with substantive concessions of land or refugees. We are the strongest power in the Middle East, and we're in no immediate physical danger, and we are in the process, are we not, of doubling our population. This is how Ben Gurion saw it, and the Mapai Party. Hence, the title I started with tonight as 48 to 52 as being the good years, but I had a question mark on the end. And why did I have a question mark in the end? Because as Truman and Atchison keep saying all during 48-52, is this really in your best interest? Okay? The issues are frozen, but they don't go away. Unfortunately, to this day, refugees are still very much on the table. Will the successors of Truman and Atchison continue to back Israel on this? I'm sorry to say that we will be hearing more and more about General Assembly Resolution 194 in the future. Hence the question mark. Good night.